Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Art of Movement and Coalition Building, Learning from Yuri Kochiyama. Thanks so much for joining us. Before we begin, first of all, I'd like to let you know that we're fortunate to have real-time captioning and American Sign Language interpretation during this live broadcast. So to view the simulcast that includes these services, please use the link provided in the comment section. My name is Karen Ishizuka. I'm a writer and the chief curator of the Japanese American National Museum. Today, I am delighted to be in conversation about the lessons and legacies of the life of Yuri Kochiyama and how she inspired so many of us in our art and activism. Yuri was one of my onesans that I called, which means respected older sisters in Japanese. I first met Yuri in 1972 in New York City. And this is a picture taken in 1978 when she was visiting Los Angeles. Yuri, in her signature cat-eyed glasses and notebook, she always carried a notebook in which she jotted down the names and addresses of everybody that she met. There's me in my 70s hair and kaftan I made all by myself, and I'm holding my daughter, Tai Bin, who's wearing her Wonder Woman bathing suit. Yuri was a Nisei, second-generation Japanese American, and she was born in San Pedro, California in 1921, and like 110,000 other Japanese Americans, including immigrants who had made the U.S. their home but were not allowed to become naturalized citizens until 1952, Yuri and her family were forced from their home and incarcerated in one of 10 concentration camps across the country. So this is a picture of Yuri when she was in Jerome, which was one of the 2 camps in Arkansas. And she's standing in front of the barracks. And I don't know if you can see that, but the sign says, "Girls, let's get acquainted." And she's advertising her Crusaders. She had a group called the Crusaders that my 2 aunts were in. A girls group that intended to increase the morale while they were in camp. So her life experiences in America's concentration camps, as well as living in Harlem after the war, really activated her in her incomparable work, building community and solidarity across racial and generational lines. So today we are again at a very critical time in our history, as the pandemic of racism that we are seeing and feeling across the country may very well be pushing our country to finally reckon with its past in some new and substantive ways. So it's so appropriate that we take the time today to reflect on Yuri's life and legacy, which serves as a cherished and timely model for today's movement and coalition building. Now, this program is organized by the Smithsonian Folklife Festival in a special collaboration with Tadaima, a virtual community pilgrimage, which is happening over 9 weeks this summer in place of the annual pilgrimages to sites of wartime Japanese American incarceration, all of which were canceled this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We also appreciate collaborating on this program with the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center and the Japanese American National Museum. So if you don't know about the Folklife Festival, please check out festival.si.edu to learn more about the programs and educational resources. And we're also placing some information about Tadaima as well as our other collaborators, Smithsonian, APAC, and JANM in the chat. As an introduction to Yuri, we're going to show a video that my son, filmmaker Tadashi Nakamura, produced for Yuri's memorial services in 2014. It features the song, "When I Grow Up, I Want to Be Just Like Yuri Kochiyama" by Blue Scholars.
Political philosophy is not just something you obtain. It's something that you develop through your lifetime. And of course, as different events happen to you and different people you meet and people you, and writings that you read, your philosophy is going to change.
I got that third world militant, still think it's relevant, even if them kids cop the shirts and stop wearing them. Humbled in the presence of the veterans and not the ones who picked up their guns, but who picked up their brethren and sisterin. History in the making, I was witnessing, listening. Seen this old Japanese lady with a sticker on her walker said, "Free Mumia," and this was before the Trustafarians were saying it. Taking it for granted that we talk about the 60s and never get to talk to anybody who done lived the shit and still exists. Or better yet, she still resists speaking to a myriad of young, dumb, and ignorant kids. I was one of them, stuck around lingering. Said that it's a privilege to meet you in person, and she took my hand, said it's good to meet you too. And when I'm out of school, asked me what I'm gonna do. I had to think about it, but truth is I knew that it was something for the youth and shit. Truly, I'd probably be a teacher if the music didn't make enough to make me wanna gamble on its sustenance. And that's why I'm writing this, to tell y'all from a scholar, when I grow up I wanna be just like Yuri Kochiyama. Holla, swear to my Kasamas, when I grow up I wanna be just like Yuri Kochiyama. And if she ever hear this, it's an honor, cause when I grow up I wanna be just like Yuri Kochiyama. Tama, serve the people proper, and when I grow up I wanna be just like Yuri Kochiyama.
The most powerful weapon for we women of color is truth. Go out and tell truth.
I seen the picture up in Life magazine. You were sitting front seat for Malcolm's last speech. Saw the first man with the shotgun. Two more came to get the job done. Now who would have thought that it'd be you holding him? I wonder what you felt when his eyes were going dim. And if he never died, would we know that he exists? Or would he been the leader that we always seem to miss? Now there's no taking back whatever happens in our midst. You remind me that it's more than just a martyr and a myth. You could have said it quits many times ever since, and you find there will always be a reason for the fist. The last one to hold them could have been somebody else. You'd still be remembered for the people that you helped. They said to keep trying, but never losing hope. Revolutionaries die, but the revolution don't, and it won't. And I put that on my mama, cause when I grow up I wanna be just like Yuri Kochiyama. Holla, swear to my Kasamas, when I grow up I wanna be just like Yuri Kochiyama. And if she ever hear this, it's an honor, cause when I grow up I wanna be just like Yuri Kochiyama. Comma, serve the people proper, when I grow up I wanna be just like Yuri Kochiyama.
The United States of America is a nation where people are not united because of those three glaring frailties: racism, injustices, and inequities. It is up to all of us to fight this mental and emotional pollution wherever and whenever it is detected.
The legacy I would like to leave is that people try to build bridges and not walls.
Yuri Kochiyama, freedom fighter, after 93 summers, has become an ancestor. From Imprisoned Nation, this is Mumia Abu Jamal.
Once our beloved big sister and mentor upon whose shoulders we stood. Now, as Mumia said, Yuri is one of the ancestors upon which generations can call upon for guidance and sustenance. At this time, I'd like to welcome our guests. And in addition, we invite you to join us. Please participate by posting your questions and comments in the live chat, and we will try to include them when we can. First of all, this is my dream team. This is like a dream come true to me. First we have Tomie Arai, and Tomie is a prolific visual artist. Perhaps best known for her public installations, but is also for her prints. And she is also the co-founder of the Chinatown Art Brigade. So Tomie knew Yuri the longest of us here, because her parents and Yuri and Bill both relocated to and settled in New York City after the war. So because they were such a small Japanese American community, they all knew each other. So Tomie grew up with Yuri and Bill's 6 kids: Billy, Audie, Aichi, Eddie, Jimmy, and Tommy. Then next, please welcome Nobuko Miyamoto. Nobuko is a singer and songwriter and artistic director of Great Leap. You might have seen her recently on Tsudu Rising, the virtual protest to close the migrant detention centers that was organized by Tsudu for Solidarity. Or maybe a long time ago in the 1961 film West Side Story. Nobuko first met Yuri in 1969 at a takeover by the Young Lords Party of a Methodist church, out of which they were running social and health services for the local Puerto Rican community. They were the only Asian faces in the crowd, so Yuri quickly sought her out and invited her to a meeting of Asian Americans for Action, which was one of the very first Pan-Asian political organizations in the country. And last, but certainly not least, is writer Kai Naima Williams. Kai is a writer, poet, and performer, and also co-founder and executive director of Eat at the Table Theater Company. Tai has a very special relationship with Yuri because she is Yuri's great-granddaughter. And I have to divulge, she is also Tomie's granddaughter. So you can see this amazing multi-generational thing going on with my son, the filmmaker who made the memorial film on Yuri, and then Kai, Yuri's great-granddaughter, and Tomie's granddaughter. So we're going to start the panel with some questions, and it's a big question, and I'm sure we could spend a lot more time on this, but the question is, what does Yuri mean to you? And I'm going to ask Tomie to start.
Oh, thank you, Karen. And
off screen.
Oh,
Karen.
Are we okay?
Maybe I should start.
Oh.
I should start.
Okay. I'm sorry. Should I keep going? Okay. Thank you. Sorry for the glitches. I want to thank you for that introduction, and I also want to give a special thanks to the Smithsonian Folklife
Karen?
Festival and to Daima for inviting me to join you today in today's reflection and celebration of Yuri's legacy. It was just really wonderful to see that film again and to be reminded, of the enormous impact that Yuri had on young people. I'm reminded of the impact that she had on me as a young single mother in my 20s, struggling to find some purpose in my life. There's a lot that's been said about Yuri's unique ability to connect with people and how she listened so deeply and encouraged people in such generous ways. And I understand how that can be such a life-changing experience, because it was for me. I think people are hungry for that kind of connection. And through Black Lives Matter and the protesters of today's police violence, we are witnessing a movement for social change and social justice on a global level. But we're also in the midst of a very dark times. These past few months during the COVID lockdown, which have been a time for mourning for those who have lost loved ones to the virus, and a time of economic pain and uncertainty for so many. So I think people are looking for leaders and role models that display courage and conviction and who will fight for us, and our demands for change. And Yuri was certainly all those things. She was a hero, she was a warrior, and she becomes larger than life every time we speak about her. But it was Yuri, the anti-hero, her humanness, her quirks, her Care Bears, her curiosity, and the constant stream of questions she had, and her love of art and music, and her gratitude to her friends and her mentors. And for those of us who were privileged to know her, those were the things that we remember her most fondly for. And these fundamentally human qualities and experiences, I think, are what draw people to Yuri's story. If you follow the trajectory of her life, it's her personal and political transformation and the ways in which she was impacted by all the people around her that is at the center of her journey into activism. And I think it's what moves me the most and what I've drawn the most lessons from. Her life answers all the questions we have about how do we stand up for our own convictions and our beliefs. And I admit that I'm often very doubtful and disheartened by what's happening in this country. And I have these questions all the time. How did Yuri find her voice and her calling? And how did an Asian American woman born to Japanese immigrants who grew up in San Pedro and went on to have 6 children and moved to Harlem and meet Malcolm X, become the greatest activist and voice for the Asian American movement? And I have to ask myself, do I have a story that's anything like hers? Yuri's own lifetime of activism did span the great social movements of her time, and she embodied the political events that shaped America in the 20th century. The civil rights movement, the women's movement, the Black liberation movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, the Asian American movement, and the struggle for redress and reparations that the Japanese, reparations for the Japanese who were so wrongly incarcerated during World War II, which was the battle that Bill and Yuri fought long and hard for and won. I think we are all living through what may be the great social movement of our time, of the 21st century, the death of George Floyd that sparked protests for racial justice across the globe. And I think we're all asking, where do we go from here? So when you ask, what does Yuri mean to me? I embrace Yuri, the hero, and the voice of our movement. But I think what I'm most grateful for is the door that she opened through the example of her own life, the way that I've been able to find myself in her story, and through her beautiful revolutionary spirit, how I was able to see the world through a more hopeful and radical lens.
Oh, thank you, Tomie. You hit it right on the nose. Nobuko, can you go next now?
That's a hard act to follow. But I consider Yuri my movement mother, because Yuri was really the one who brought me into the movement and into the Asian American movement. When I met Yuri in that church, the Young Lord's Church in East Harlem, I was formerly a dancer, and I worked on Broadway and in films. I really wasn't political at all until I helped a friend of mine make a film about the Black Panthers, and that's what I was doing in the Young Lord's Church. We were filming for the film, and Yuri came up and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "What are you doing here?" I turned around, I looked, and I said, this little Japanese woman, Nisei, like my aunties. And I'm thinking, what is she doing here? and then she had her notebook, just like you said. She had her notebook. She says, well, where are you from? What camp were your people in? And, she was asking these questions of me, and I'm going like, is she a reporter? What is she? And then finally somebody walked by and they called her, oh, hello, Sister Mary. And I'm going, oh my God, they know her. And these are, Black and Puerto Rican people in this church. And I'm thinking, wow, she's one of them. She's an activist. And so one of the questions she asked me was, do you know any Asian groups in New York? Because I was from LA. And I said, no, I don't. And so she invited me to a meeting of Asian Americans for Action. And in that place, I met all these other Asian activists, including Chris Ijima. And Yuri was there. Chris's mom was there. So it was a mixture of second generation Japanese Americans and third generation activists, younger people. And that's how I got into the movement. And with Chris Ijima, who happened to be a great singer and a songwriter, you heard his voice earlier in Free the Land. Chris and I just really stumbled into writing a first song together at a conference that we were at. And this song, in this song, we saw the power of art in reaching people. So it began a journey for us to begin writing music and singing for the movement. So I was a troubadour, basically. And but I always say you never know where you're going to go when you meet Yuri, when you go with Yuri, because she takes you places, but you always know it's going to change you. And she introduced me to my to the father of my baby, Kamau, who was sitting on her lap in the picture that you saw previously, and that changed my life as well. Having Kamau and having a mixed race child really changed my life as an artist and as a person. So Yuri's, what she said about it's who you meet is that changes you, the people you meet along your journey. And she was a major person that changed my life.
Thanks, Nobuko. Kai.
Well, I would say that it's very clear that Yuri is an ancestor to many. And I have, for a long time, taken great pride in being her descendant. Growing up, I was aware of her powerful presence. I was aware of her importance within my family and their circle of friends. But it wasn't until I began to study her work as a young teenager that I started to understand her magnitude as a political figure and also her impacts on core elements of my own identity, framework of my family, and values with which I was raised. Yuri was widely known for inviting people into her home, both people who approached her to study and to work, and also people who were seeking shelter, safety, support. For example, she housed many political prisoners who needed refuge. I believe her Harlem apartment was dubbed Grand Central Station because so many people would come through, and because she would host these revolutionary salons for activists, artists, movement people to gather and exchange ideas. So she and Bill created a physical space for collaboration and change making within their space. And the fact that Yuri situated her movement, her network within her home, I think, for me, creates a powerful symbol for her impact on my own life. Because movement was inextricable from Yuri's personal life, the foundations of my family feel rooted in collectivity and collective power. For me, she represents the phrase, the personal is political. Work, art, movement, family, these are elements that for some people are compartmentalized, but for me, they always felt combined in and at the home. And I think in that combination, there's force and there's energy. Because I am Yuri's descendant, I feel I have the unique honor of directly inheriting her legacy. And what I inherited from a very young age was a recognition of injustices, how they were implemented by systems of power, and the imperative to fight against them. Yuri taught her children, who taught me that compassion for others, solidarity, community are not only values, but also responsibilities. And because I was raised in a family of activists, I always felt a sense of duty to call out injustices where I saw them. And I was encouraged to stand up for oppressed groups of people, whether or not I counted myself amongst them. And I am a mixed race, Black, queer woman. And I think that being raised in a family that enabled me to recognize systemic harms committed against others, but also against myself, and that empowered me to view resistance and revolution as a necessity and as a calling. I see that as an immense privilege. Not everyone is reared with that kind of fundamental support. And I really credit Yuri for that.
Thanks, Kai. Oh my gosh. So this is a story circle, you know, we're talking story here. And so Tomie, I'd actually like to ask you to talk about the importance of community and then the role of the arts in building community.
Yeah, I so appreciated those remarks, Kai, about Yuri and Bill's apartment, because I actually think that that might have been the first Asian American community center. Even though I was around when Bill and Yuri and so many other Nisei and Sansei were involved in building an United Asian Center for a very brief time in New York in the 70s. You know, if I were asked to do a portrait of Yuri, it would have to be a family portrait. And if I began that family portrait, I think it would have to turn into a mural because her family was huge. And I'd probably run out of room. I think that I would have her seated next to Bill, who was her partner, and surrounded by her children, Eddie, Audie, Jimmy, Tomie, Aichi, and Billy, and all the grandchildren, including Zulu, my son-in-law, and Masai, and Akemi and Mark, and the great-grandkids, and on, because Yuri's beautiful extended family was pretty vast. And I think that having been introduced to Yuri through her family and through my relationships with her children, I always associated Yuri with family and community. And her children really embodied in so many ways Yuri's values. They were the ones who welcomed me into their homes and invited me to dinners, and Eddie and my husband Ligon and Chris Ijima and Warren Furatani and Art Ishii and Bill were involved in founding East West World Records together. First Asian American record company back in the day when they had vinyl. And Audie and Aichi were both members of Sodaiko, which was a taiko group that my husband was involved in. So our lives were intimately entwined. And I think that the community, Asian American and the New York community and beyond, you know, really was the engine, the fuel that drove everything that we did. I'd just like to say a few words about New York in the 50s because, you know, so much known about the West Coast, but very little is ever talked about when you think about New York and the East Coast. But there was a small Japanese American enclave in New York after the war. And most of the people, like my family and Bill and Yuri, settled in New York because they wanted to rebuild their lives. And they were really rebuilding from scratch because so many people had just come out of the camps and really had nothing but the future to look forward to. So I think there was this sense that we were all connected, even though we didn't share intimately, you know, each other's lives. And I went to school, for example, with Philip Sugimoto, who was Henry Sugimoto's son, the painter. I went to Buddhist Sunday school with Larry Hama, who became a very well-known comic book artist, and Alan Okada, who was the founder of Sodaiko. And across the street, I was Mari Kajiwara. I took dance lessons with her, and I was terrible, but she went on to become the lead dancer in Alvin Ailey. And so there were people of all kinds, you know, who were involved in the arts that I would meet on the street and in my classrooms, and I went to high school with. And so when we talk about art and culture, you know, it wasn't something that we encountered in museums or in galleries. It was the people we knew and met on the street and went to school with and went to work with. And I think that that idea that we were all part of this large community, and in the 70s, we were all part of building something together, is what has been the foundation for my work for decades. I mean, it's a practice that I have learned, that was forged through my relationships with activists in the Asian American movement, and it's something that has helped me connect to the world and, you know, really find meaning in the artwork that I do.
Thanks, Tomie. Yeah, I think the connection between art and community and activism is just inextricable. We need to have all of them together in conversation with all of them. Nobuko, can I ask you how Yuri influenced you as an artist and an activist? Is she still here? Okay, let's pivot to Kai then, and then we'll catch Yuri. We'll catch Nobuko when she comes back. So Kai, let's see. You know what? You had mentioned your ancestry and your mixed race. So what does Black and Asian solidarity mean to you? And what can a new generation of activists learn?
Well, I see my family history as a history of Black and Asian solidarity, and I mean that quite literally. My grandmother, Audie, Yuri's daughter, met my grandfather, Terry Williams, while they were working for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And so in some ways, I see myself as a living product of Yuri's capacity to bring people of different racial backgrounds together in pursuit of Black liberation. My personal understanding of Black and Asian solidarity extends beyond bonding people in struggle to bonding people in love and in family. And that solidarity produced true intersectionality in the form of generations of Black and Asian children, not just me, my father, and my brother, but also my cousins and my aunt as well, who are also Yuri's descendants. I'd say, unlike a lot of mixed race people, I never experienced having to mitigate prejudices or navigate ideological differences between sides of my family. What could have been felt as conflict or division within my identities, at least as a child, I found fusion. And I grew up believing that Black and Asian people both suffered racism, and that the similarities in their oppressions should help them see each other as allies and even comrades in collective struggle for freedom. As I got older and became a scholar, I became aware of crucial distinctions in how Black and Asian people are both positioned within and are subjected to racism in America. But for a long time, I was ignorant to anti-Black racism in Asian communities because I didn't know many Asian people outside of my family and their friends. And I was ignorant to biases held by some Black Americans against Asian people. Often those biases are produced in response to anti-Black prejudice. And how that connects to a new generation of activists, I think that we are at a point where the role and the value of social media in liberation efforts cannot be denied. With the Black Lives Matter uprisings and the struggles to defund and abolish the police state, platforms like Twitter and Instagram have become absolutely critical sites on which we organize protests, participate in discourse, share care and support one another, even redistribute wealth to people in need, and perhaps most importantly, spread information in real time in a moment of total media suppression, propaganda, and of course, abuse of state power. But there is a culture of division that is particularly prominent on social media for a multitude of reasons, partially because social media, these are platforms on which people of wildly different and opposing ideologies connect to engage with like-minded individuals. And because social media operates by providing users with content that is curated to serve their specific belief systems. And this cultural divisiveness is really strong within a generation of people who have grown up alongside the internet, and it has permeated in-person interaction. So for example, in my freshman year of college, there were multiple organizing and affinity groups on campus that would make it a priority to work together on events and sometimes on protests. And by my senior year, those kinds of collaborations were virtually unheard of, even extinct, or nearly extinct. I believe that there is currently far less of an emphasis on solidarity and more of an emphasis on self-determination and allegiance within specific communities. And that's not inherently a bad thing. The desire for marginalized peoples to have and to maintain their own spaces, to empower one another, is totally valid, as is the fear that in making comparisons, we will end up equating oppressions that are actually distinct, and the risk that the most marginalized voices will be spoken over and erased in attempts to uncover common ground. But when the benefits of solidarity are dismissed offhand because of distrust between groups, and when individual allyship, which is often judged on social media as a measure of one's personal character, as opposed to their work, when that takes precedent over collaborative action, that is when division becomes harmful to movements, in my opinion. I believe that it was Taiyo Na who wrote that the spirit of Yuri is interconnectedness, and I think that's really apt. What Yuri can teach us is that it is productive to work together, not to erase distinctions, but to recognize commonalities in our oppressions so that we can collectively combat systems responsible for all of our oppressions. Solidarity acknowledges that no one is free until everyone is free. All lives cannot matter until Black lives matter. And that when we see our interconnectedness, we are enabled to access collective power.
Great, that's amazing. Yeah, good analysis, good thoughts for the future and for more discussion. Nobuko, you're back with us. Can you tell us about how Yuri influenced you, both as an activist and an artist?
First, I want to just thank Kai, because this just shows the power of Yuri's legacy is Kai. Thank you. You're teaching us and keeping the flame alive. So, but in my early experience with Yuri, maybe not a lot of people know that she was a citizen of the Republic of New Africa, and Republic of New Africa was an organization, but that was based on Malcolm's philosophy, and people were not members. They were citizens of New Africa, and Yuri was probably the lone Asian American citizen of this Black organization. So she took me to a meeting, and that's where I met my son's father with Atala and Matulu. And she wanted us, Chris and me, to perform for this demonstration that they were doing at the UN. Now, as Kai said, has been very little interchange between Blacks and Blacks and Asians, except, you know, if you go to Chinatown, you know, in New York, it's like, but in this case, so we went and we sang in this rally for Black people, and Matulu, as best he could, introduced us. But they at first looked at us like, well, who are these people? But as soon as we got into the song and we sang We Are the Children, and we were talking about being in concentration camps, we're talking about being part of the third world people in this country, their hearts opened up and they understood who we were and how we were in solidarity with them, and as well as accepting our own oppression. So this is a sort of a simple way of how a 3-minute song can be a bridge between communities and just sort of open up a way of conversation, just as a painting or a mural can. And the sort of visceral thing of music, which Yuri understood and always supported in such an open way that really encouraged us in our journey as artists.
Thanks, Nobuko. There's so much to talk about. We're at 40 minutes in now, and we have like less than 20 minutes to go, but I do have one more question for all of you. I think we've all mentioned this, is intergenerationality. You know, I think that is the key. So what can we learn from the other generations, both the older and the younger? Once again, can I start with you, Tomie?
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I am really a little awestruck by Kai. Very proud to be her grandmother at this moment. But, you know, I feel like this transmission of knowledge, this transgenerational transmission of knowledge is exactly, I think, what we need to be doing. Certainly, one thing that struck me about the film was that I am the same age that Yuri was in that film. And when I met Yuri, I was 20. And I looked up to her, but now I'm her easily older than the age she was in that film. And I do feel like there is so much for me to learn. I also believe that one of the things that Yuri and Bill did obsessively was archive the movement. I think their apartment, you know, I mentioned it could have been the first Asian American arts cultural center, but it could also have been an Asian American museum, because it was lined, you know, there were posters on the wall and leaflets and piled on the table, and you know, you never saw Yuri without a camera. I used to say she was our Instagram, because without her documentation, I don't think we would have known what was going on. So I do think it's so important to document and bear witness to what is happening, and to understand the importance of history. I mean, when I talk about transgenerational transmission of knowledge, it is a dialogue and an exchange, but it's those lessons that we draw from the past and bring into the present that I think are so invaluable now. I also just wanted to say something about Kai's remarks about solidarity and allyship, because I think that Yuri, of all people, embodied what it meant to support Black lives. And, you know, it wasn't performative in any way. She had devoted her lifetime to fighting against the unjust imprisonment of Black and brown people. She was our voice and our advocate, and she fought for us. So and all people, and I feel that we need to understand what it means to be in solidarity with people and not center ourselves. This is not about Asians for Black Lives Matter. This is about Black Lives Matter. So I do feel like Yuri modeled that, and I think that we can draw so much from her life example.
Thank you, Tomie. Nobuko, I'm going to throw you a question that we've had from the audience, and I think you'd be great to be able to answer this. What are some of the strategies that you would recommend for bringing generations together over important social justice issues? And I know you've done this over many years, so can you speak to that question, please?
Well, I mean, there are so many different ways of coming together. I mean, when an issue comes up, for instance, when 9/11 happened, as an artist, I was looking like, how can I respond to this situation? How can I bring people of different religions together to talk about Islamophobia? And because my son was Muslim, it sort of opened the door for me to be able to do that in a very deep way. But the same thing right now with what's going on, the emergence of the importance of Black Lives Matter. How do you create conversation? And we've been it's been an ongoing project, like the Fandango Bone Project, which is bringing people together in one circle to learn each other's cultures and traditions. That's something that Yuri was really aware of, was legacy, of understanding our roots as well as just the present moment, and the strength that we gain from knowing our roots. She didn't ignore being Japanese American just because she was engaged in the Black movement. She was very aware of who she was, and in that way it made her very real. She wasn't trying to be Black. But she was who she was with her own history, that walked in there and marched with them. And I think they respected her for that. So being who we are, embracing who we are, and at the same time having empathy and engaging and exchanging stories. Story is really an important way of deepening, and as Grace Lee Boggs says, growing our souls. If we don't grow our souls to be able to expand and to understand all of the issues, I mean, we have a lot to learn right now. We have Native American people that we have to address, as well as Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. This country has a lot of learning to do about who we are and where we're living at, to move forward in a true way for liberation for all people. So telling stories, I mean, people could do it on any level that they live, but it's how you live. And that's what Yuri did. She lived when you saw how she lived, you say, well, I can do that too. She did it by example. So, each in our own way is going to have to invent what that is. And that's what our path is right now. In any way that we can contribute, we can decide that for ourselves.
Very nice, very nice. To close out the formal program, I'm going to ask Kai to read one of her poems, which was inspired by Yuri, and it's called One More Map.
Thank you. So this is One More Map. My homegirl says, you've got to learn to laugh at it. So here I am. Wing joints unfolded, untidied, open-throated, letting it rain, clearing it out. I wish I could map my way back to this body, through a clearing and not unfinished thicket. At least the new land mass accrued is reason enough for ink. I Ching knows me and my witches can't go on much more voyage or take on another techno beating. I find my hurt in my phone and go back for more. The map parameters melting back and forth. Fluctuating measure keeps me humble, but I am also boundless in love. My heart is Yuri's apartment on 126th, teeming with lives that are never sacrificed, never invited in vain. All the cradled heads continuing on living room altar every dawn. When I hear revolution, there are the taiko drums that sent Yuri on. Can I just say, it hurts to keep on going on. I don't want this world where we survive surprisingly. I want to love the feeling of people putting their hands in my hair. To love is not to flinch. Sleep comes with conditions. The dream in which I'm gunning towards exit and it does not exist. All flooding feet won't hide me from the mass. Any one of us might one day be made to outlast. Have to find out what we're made of. How we don't meet the sweet of an orange and know if it will satiate or trail desire on until we peel. Venus winked beside the moon tonight, my homegirl behind the wheel. Every loss she nurses hidden against naked eye, I carry space for here, in armor of pinkies closed, vow of crossed clothes, hers is mine. Love is a verb, and here am I, working and birthing unworn world. None will disease it for paper's sake. None will make a war of my inner countries. When I spill my infertility fears, she'll call me silly instead of saying things like, we are living the apocalypse. There are all sorts of children who will need families. She sets her hair down on my shoulder. Suddenly, I remember emerging from these woods before. We nibble that thought, dried hope provision like vision, returning when it chooses to relieve you. I've tasted tree's edge, fresh wet dirt, sun-guide, and sap, sap, sap when you tap in, and moving back need not be losing weight. Since the ways out have hardened inside, they tip the scale to nudge me. Sometimes I return to once love. If not to feed, then to speak. Sometimes we are kind, sometimes we are of one mind, my girl and I, many limbs, messy symphony of stumbled jokes, in the bathhouse where our bodies soak, clearing trails under old beds of skin, everything we scrub behind a tick in the journey. When the water's hot enough, I sink inside my waiting arms and come home. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Oh, Kai. Okay, so I think all of us can agree that, you know, Kai has stolen our show here and and Yuri is just smiling down on us all. So thank you so much. We are going to really have to wrap this up. I know there's been requests for a part 2 of this because I think you all have so much to say. But at this point, thank you so much to Tomie, Nobuko, and Kai, my dream team, really. And thanks to all y'all who are watching, listening, and commenting. I know there are a lot of online programs right now, and we really appreciate that you tuned into ours. So follow the Smithsonian Folklife page on Facebook and also Instagram, YouTube, visit their website, and come back from the next program. There's 3 more weeks of Tadaima programming, so you can get more information at JAM Pilgrimages, that's JAM pilgrimages.com. And I want to close with a big shout out to the amazing staff, interns and volunteers of the Folklife Festival. Special thanks to Erin Aoyama, Hanako Wakatsuki, Sojin Kim, Lisa Sasaki, Joy Yamaguchi, Tad Nakamura, Blue Scholars, Alisa Huff, Sarah Rothman, Jenny Maycock, Diane Nutting, Albert Tong, and Julia Nye for all your work. And as always, we send love and thanks to Yuri and Bill's kids, Eddie, Audie, Jimmy, and Tomie, for sharing their parents and for letting us stay at their house for so many times. And as always, we remember Billy and Aichi as well. So we're going to leave you with a slideshow of Yuri. Thanks to everyone who shared their photos. And the slideshow is going to go over a song called A Single Stone that was written and performed by Nobuko.
A single stone, many ripples in the pond, reaching so far beyond. A single spark on the dark horizon can tell the coming of the dawn. Heroes come, heroes gone. How to keep remembering is to carry on. How to keep remembering is to carry on. Once there was a king who said, I have a dream. Once there was a Malcolm whose words burn like fire. Once there was a Cesar who was a shepherd